Right now, as you're watching this, there are serial killers walking free. Not in prison. Not dead. Free. Shopping at grocery stores, sitting in traffic, maybe even living on your street. These 5 cases represent some of the most terrifying unsolved serial murder investigations in history. The evidence exists. The patterns are clear. And the killers simply disappeared. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows if they stopped. You've probably heard of the Zodiac killer, but the details are worse than you think. Between December 1968 and October 1969, a man murdered at least 5 confirmed victims in the San Francisco Bay Area. He attacked couples at lovers' lanes. He shot a cab driver point blank. And then he did something that serial killers almost never do. He started writing to the newspapers. The letters were taunting, arrogant, and sometimes included cryptographic ciphers that he claimed contained his identity. The first cipher was cracked by a schoolteacher and his wife within a week. It read like the ramblings of a man who killed because he believed his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. The second major cipher, the Z340, wasn't solved until 2020, over 50 years later, by a team of codebreakers using modern computing. It didn't contain his name. It was more taunting: "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me." The investigation was a jurisdictional disaster. Multiple police departments, no coordination, witnesses who gave conflicting descriptions. The prime suspect for decades was a man named Arthur Lee Allen, who was investigated extensively but never charged. DNA from the stamps on the Zodiac's letters didn't match Allen, but the DNA sample was degraded and may not even be the killer's. In 2021, a team of independent investigators named another suspect, Gary Francis Post, a deceased Air Force veteran, but the case remains officially open. The Zodiac killed at least 5, possibly dozens more. He may have died of old age in his bed. We'll probably never know. For years, the bodies kept turning up along a desolate stretch of Ocean Parkway on Long Island, New York. Wrapped in burlap, buried in the coastal brush. The first 4 were found in December 2010 by a police officer and his cadaver dog. He was actually searching for a different missing woman, Shannon Gilbert, who had vanished after fleeing a client's home in a panic. Over the following months, investigators found 10 sets of human remains. Most of the victims were young women who had advertised services on Craigslist. But there were also a male sex worker, a young Asian man, and a toddler. The sheer variety of victims suggested either multiple killers using the same dumping ground or a single killer active over a very long period. The case went cold for over a decade. Then, in July 2023, police arrested Rex Hoyerman, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park. He was charged with 3 of the murders, and a 4th charge was added later. The arrest was based on DNA evidence and cell phone location data. But Hoyerman has not been connected to all of the Gilgo Beach remains. Some of those victims may have a different killer entirely. And the identity of the toddler has never been established. As of now, Hoyerman has pleaded not guilty. Even if he's convicted, the full story of what happened along that stretch of highway may never be fully told. We're only halfway through this list, and it gets darker from here. If you're the kind of person who needs to know how these stories end even when they don't have endings, subscribe to Mind Trap. We cover the cases nobody else will. Hit subscribe and the bell. Let's keep going. In the spring of 1946, the twin cities of Texarkana on the Texas-Arkansas border were terrorized by someone the newspapers called the Phantom Killer. Over a 10-week period, the attacker struck 5 times, always on weekends, always at night, always targeting couples parked in isolated areas. The first 2 attacks left victims alive but badly beaten. The next 3 were fatal. The killer shot his victims and, in the case of one attack, used a bizarre method. He attached a knife to the barrel of his gun and stabbed one victim while shooting another. The attacks created a panic. Residents armed themselves. The Texas Rangers were called in. The town was effectively under siege. Then, as suddenly as the attacks began, they stopped. No arrest was ever made. A suspect named Yellow Swinney was investigated extensively. His wife even gave a statement implicating him, but her testimony was deemed inadmissible because Texas law at the time didn't allow a wife to testify against her husband. Swinney was imprisoned for other crimes and died in 1994, never charged with the Phantom murders. The case remains open. The people of Texarkana still remember. Every year, the local drive-in theater screens The Town That Dreaded Sundown, a 1976 film based on the case. The killer was never identified. Glasgow, Scotland, late 1960s. Three women, Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald, and Helen Puddock, were each found murdered after attending the Barrowland Ballroom, one of the city's most popular dance halls. All three had been strangled. All three had been menstruating at the time of their deaths, a detail the killer seemed to fixate on. The third victim, Helen Puddock, had spent the evening dancing and then shared a taxi with her sister and a man who called himself John. During the ride, John quoted extensively from the Bible, specifically Old Testament passages about the uncleanliness of menstruation. He was polite, well-spoken, and appeared to be in his late 20s